Welcome to History with Herodotus, where we embark on a journey through the annals of time, exploring the complexities and wonders of human history. Today, we find ourselves at the threshold of one of the most pivotal moments in American history, the Battle of Gettysburg, fought in the scorching summer of 1863. This battle, a clash of titans, would decide the fate of a nation, testing the mettle of its people and shaping the course of freedom. As we delve into this narrative, let us first set our gaze upon the landscape of America in the early 1860s. The United States, barely more than 8 decades old, was a nation torn asunder by the conflicting ideals of unity and states' rights, with the specter of slavery hanging precariously over the divide. It was an era of great upheaval, where brother fought against brother, and the very fabric of American society seemed on the brink of unraveling. The seeds of this conflict were sown years prior in the compromises and concessions that had papered over the deepening chasm between the industrialized North and the agrarian South. The election of Abraham Lincoln as president in 1860, with his platform opposed to the expansion of slavery, became the catalyst for several Southern states to secede from the Union, forming the Confederate States of America. In the spring of 1863, the war between the Union and Confederacy had already raged for 2 years, leaving deep scars across the American landscape. The Confederacy, under the leadership of General Robert E. Lee, had achieved significant victories, but their army was in dire need of supplies and a decisive win to convince the North that the South's independence was a viable reality. It was against this backdrop that General Lee set his sights on invading the North, aiming to win a battle on Union territory, which he hoped would persuade the United States to recognize the Confederacy as a sovereign nation. His target was Pennsylvania, a state rich in resources and symbolic value, with its capital, Harrisburg, and the major city of Philadelphia, posing significant strategic importance. Lee's Army of Northern Virginia, numbering around 75,000 men, began its march into Pennsylvania in early June 1863. The Union Army of the Potomac, under the command of General George Meade, totaling about 82,000 soldiers, moved to intercept them. In the days leading up to the battle, skirmishes and smaller engagements took place, as scouts and advance units from both sides clashed in the rolling hills and verdant countryside of southern Pennsylvania. The town of Gettysburg, with its strategic crossroads, would soon become the focal point of this maelstrom, unwittingly hosting a clash that would decide not just the fate of the war, but the future of American democracy itself. As we move closer to the eve of battle, the air is thick with anticipation and foreboding. The soldiers on both sides, weary from their marches and aware of the stakes, prepare for what lies ahead. In the fields and farms around Gettysburg, the local populace, caught in the midst of this impending storm, can only watch and wait as two armies, each believing deeply in its cause, ready themselves to collide in a maelstrom of fire and steel. As the sun rose on July 1, 1863, the tranquility of the Pennsylvania countryside was shattered by the sound of cannons and musketry, signaling the beginning of the Battle of Gettysburg. The Confederate forces, under General Harry Heth, advanced towards Gettysburg, driving back the Union cavalry east of town. The Union infantry, primarily composed of soldiers from Wisconsin, Indiana, and New York, rushed to occupy the high ground west of Gettysburg, including McPherson's Ridge and Oak Ridge. The morning's fighting was intense, with both sides suffering heavy casualties. The Confederates, however, managed to push the Union lines back through the town, with fierce street fighting erupting in Gettysburg's streets. As the day wore on, the Union troops fell back to higher ground south of town, where they formed a defensive line on high ground, including Cemetery Ridge. On the second day of the battle, July 2nd, General Lee launched a massive assault on the Union positions on Cemetery Ridge, hoping to break through the Union lines and gain control of the high ground. The fighting was brutal, with waves of Confederate soldiers crashing against the Union defenses. The Union lines wavered, but ultimately held, thanks in part to the heroic defense of Little Round Top by the 20th Maine Infantry Regiment. As the sun began to set on July 2nd, the Confederates had made some gains, but at a terrible cost. On the evening of July 2nd, General Lee met with his generals to plan the next day's assault. He decided to launch a massive frontal attack on the Union center, hoping to break through and win the battle. The third day of the battle, July 3rd, dawned hot and humid, with a sense of foreboding hanging over the battlefield. The Confederate artillery opened fire at 1:30 p.m., unleashing a barrage of cannon fire that shook the earth and sent shrapnel flying everywhere. The Union artillery responded in kind, and for nearly 2 hours, the two sides exchanged cannon fire, causing widespread destruction and chaos. At around 3:00 p.m., the Confederate infantry emerged from the woods and began their advance across the open fields, hoping to reach the Union lines and break through. But the Union defenses were strong, and the Confederates were met with a hail of musketry and artillery fire that cut them down in droves. The assault, known as Pickett's Charge, was a disaster for the Confederates, with over 50% casualties. As the survivors of Pickett's Charge stumbled back to their own lines, the battle was effectively over. The Union Army had held its ground, and the Confederates had suffered a devastating defeat. General Lee would later say, "It is all my fault," acknowledging that his decision to launch the frontal assault had been a mistake. As the survivors of Pickett's Charge stumbled back to their own lines, the battle was effectively over. The Union Army had held its ground, and the Confederates had suffered a devastating defeat. General Lee would later say, "It is all my fault," acknowledging that his decision to launch the frontal assault had been a mistake. The Confederate Army, battered and bruised, began its retreat from Gettysburg on July 4, leaving behind thousands of dead and wounded soldiers. The Union Army, victorious but also heavily damaged, tended to its own wounded and buried its dead. The town of Gettysburg, which had been a quiet Pennsylvania village just days before, was now a scene of utter devastation. Buildings were destroyed, streets were littered with debris, and the local population was left to pick up the pieces. As the news of the Union victory spread, celebrations erupted across the North, with people gathering in cities and towns to cheer and weep together. In the months and years that followed, the Battle of Gettysburg would become a pivotal moment in the American Civil War. The Confederate Army never fully recovered from its losses at Gettysburg, and the Union Army's victory marked a turning point in the war. Today, the Battle of Gettysburg is remembered as a testament to the bravery and sacrifice of the soldiers who fought and died on those bloody July days. The Gettysburg National Military Park, established in 1895, preserves the battlefield and offers a poignant reminder of the battle's significance. Visitors from around the world come to walk the fields and ridges where the battle was fought, to see the monuments and markers that commemorate the units and soldiers who took part, and to reflect on the enduring legacy of the battle. The battle marked a turning point in the Civil War, paving the way for the ultimate defeat of the Confederacy and the abolition of slavery. It also underscored the importance of preserving the Union and upholding the principles of freedom and equality. As historian James McPherson has noted, Gettysburg was a watershed moment in American history, a moment when the fate of the nation hung in the balance. The Battle of Gettysburg's influence can be seen in many aspects of American life, from politics and culture to society and memory. It has inspired countless works of art, literature, and music, and continues to shape our understanding of ourselves and our place in the world. That's all for today's History with Herodotus. Remember to like, share, and subscribe, and until next time, remember that to understand the present, we must first understand the past.